Hey, horror fans, Board now and Rachel McDonald back with you. So we are continuing our tour through the Halloween movies, through obviously the whole franchise in the run up to Halloween Kills. This week we're going to be looking at the first of the Rob Zombie movies. So just Halloween. We'll be talking about the sequel soon. But yeah, Halloween, a remake of the classic 1978 John Carpenter movie. So you can find a review of that on the channel as well. We've covered that before. So this is Rob Zombie's remake, and it's pretty much a straight remake, because the only difference is that you do get these scenes at the beginning which delve into Michael's past. His past as imagined by Rob Zombie, I should say, not imagined by many Halloween fans. And you get that stuff. I mean, he basically came out of a trailer park, it seems, based on this movie, and everyone he knows is a scumbag, basically, and that's kind of it. So this is the movie that actually tries to give the character motivation and actually gives him a backstory, which of course goes against the point of the appeal of the character, the mystery of the character. Me is really offensive and really, so I mean, obviously we'll get to two, but potentially one of the worst horror movies I've ever seen because of the way it butchers the original. I think that there's many crimes in the movie, but this is one of the biggest, just the way it, but it takes scenes which are kind of like carbon copies of the original movie, scenes from that, but it just rehashes them in such a weak, such a lame sort of way, and just throws them away like they're nothing almost. Scenes that were really suspenseful and compelling in that movie just gets like whittled away to nothing in this. And but that's the thing, when you look at some of the other sequels we've done in the Halloween franchise and Retcham recently, and at least we took away some entertainment from that film. I didn't really take any entertainment away from this. If you want to jump in there.
Yeah, okay, so this was my first time watching the zombie films. I do not like Rob Zombie as a director. He's just not my style. I saw House of a Thousand Corpses when I was about 18 or 19, and that movie lived in my nightmares for ages after seeing it. It is just he's too much. I understand that there are certain brands of horror and certain branches which are supposed to shock and are supposed to be extreme, and Zombie has always been in that category. You also have like Eli Roth in that category, kind of the torture porn type stuff that came out after in the post Saw era, and Zombie obviously leans very heavily into that. So I went into these movies very nervous. It might surprise you guys to hear this, given that I do love horror so much, but I am actually a very highly sensitive person, and certain horror is too much for me. There are certain movies that I will never watch because they are just too much, and Zombie almost makes it into that category because he can be so extreme. I do need to ask you though, Keith, did you watch the director's cut or the theatrical version?
It's just the theatrical.
Okay, I watched
I'm not too sure.
Cut.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll just assume because.
Yeah, so I thankfully watched the theatrical cut because the director's cut, here's one way to tell. The director's cut has a scene, and I was very, very worried for this scene because I knew that this scene was going to be very traumatizing if it actually did come up. But luckily, I think it's only in the director's cut, where two men break into the mental asylum that Michael is in, and they rape a female patient in front of him. Did the version you watch have that scene?
No, I don't remember that.
Okay, so that's only in the director's cut. But this is an example of Zombies' kind of extremism. Like a scene like that, it doesn't need to exist in this kind of. It doesn't need to exist full stop. But it really doesn't need to exist in this movie. It doesn't seem to serve any kind of point. So I found when I started watching this movie, I knew that it was going to be extreme. I've watched enough like YouTube videos on the Halloween franchise in general to know that zombies films are going to be extreme, that it's going to be a bit kind of like the Devil's Rejects, that we're going to have characters like that. And when we first started the film, obviously, like you said, Michael is a kid. He lives in a trailer park. His mum is a stripper, which we get some great scenes of her, which she's played by Zombie's wife. So I found that very weird that he would put her in that type of role and have her in that type of scene, but whatever.
I think she's in most of his movies, isn't she?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she is.
He keeps casting her.
Yeah. So that's Sherry Zombie, who is actually not too bad. Like, I found okay, so this film has about 40 minutes at the beginning that is just not needed. Like Keith said, Zombie tries to give Michael a backstory, which not only, like Keith said, goes against the entire Michael Myers mythos. Like, the reason that he's so scary is because he doesn't have a motivation and because he doesn't have a backstory. Zombie wanted to give him one, and he gave him one of the worst backstories you could think of. You know, the stepfather is a perv who is obviously trying something out on the daughter. The mother is a stripper. The daughter, his older sister, is like trashy and horrible, and the only person he seems to have any affection for is his baby sister, which we're going to get into this because this movie really leans into the Laurie and Michael brother-sister relationship, like a lot, like even more than they did in the second movie. And I spent the first 40 minutes just thinking to myself, I hate this movie. Like, I literally wanted to turn the movie off because it is so extreme. Like, think of the absolute worst portrayal of like a redneck family that you could think of, and then like triple it, and then you might get close to what this family is like. The stepfather is obviously supposed to be a horrible human being. A lot of the comments he makes towards Michael are very coded in homophobic slurs. You know, he calls him like a fairy and other, you know, homophobic slurs, and obviously that's supposed to emphasize how horrible he is. But I remember watching a retrospective on Halloween, and someone was saying that one of the terrors from the first Halloween, the very original Carpenter one, was that it was bad things happening to good people. It was bad things happening to your everyday suburban people, and that's why it was so terrifying. Whereas the zombie one, the first 40 minutes, these are shit people. They're horrible people that you expect horrible things to happen to. So when the eventual murder happens, you just don't care. Like, when Michael eventually goes nuts and murders his whole family, I don't know about you, but I just didn't give a crap about any of them. Way too much overkill. Way too much overkill. And again, I was expecting this. Obviously, being Zombie, you have to expect this level of violence. But for example, there is a scene where Michael beats another child to death, a bully. And the scene goes on for, I swear, at least 10 minutes. It's of just Michael beating this kid as this kid screams and cries for help. And I ended up having to mute the TV. I ended up watching a lot of the kill scenes on mute because they just go for so long and they're just so over the top and they're so in your face. And I was so stressed. I felt so stressed out watching this movie. And so, the first 40 minutes are just not needed. We don't need this backstory of Michael being in this trailer park family. We don't need to see his motivations. It's never who he's been. And I didn't like also that the kid Michael talks, because Michael doesn't talk. Like, even in the 78 version, when you see him as a kid, he doesn't talk, he's silent. So the fact that kid Michael talks was very jarring for me. And I just felt like if you took out those first 40 minutes, you could still have the film. Like, all you really needed was the scene where he kills his sister, and then you could go straight into the 20 years later or whatever, because those first 40 minutes were just completely useless. At least I thought that they added nothing to the story. What about you? Did you?
Terrible. They're terrible. The actor playing Michael is terrible.
He's not great,
you've got the stepfather. No, you've got the stepfather who's calling everyone a whore under the sun. And I mean, just making a bigger point about that is, I think some of that does come across as this is what Zombie thinks of your average person, your average like working class person, and it's
Yeah.
actually quite offensive. I mean, it's really mean spirited. And again, you wanted to. For any film to sort of work with characters like this, you have to have a mix of characters. So you just sort of zone out when everyone's basically a scumbag. Because even like the females in the family who are meant to be more sympathetic, even they are sort of written a bit, like the sister's quite sort of narky and sort of
Yeah.
shitty as well, and so there's just nothing there for you, and everything looks really grimy but not really in a stylistic sort of way. Yeah, very sort of like grimy, ugly, murky sort of look to the film. And yeah, I mean, this whole 40-minute scene or sequence certainly could have been cut down, but I agree with you. Then it adds nothing. The stuff at school with Michael is just OTT.
Yeah.
It's just very in your face and melodramatic, and you get like musical montages in the movie almost. I mean, I think that's a way, because the Love Hurts sort of thing, when they're playing that and they're trying to like cut between strip club scenes and Michael
Yeah.
just on the street being moody at Halloween. It
Mhm.
just, again, it's not the tone you should be going for in this sort of movie. And
No.
so I think that's another side, than the movie actually feels quite soapy and melodramatic as well, which obviously it shouldn't be. Necessarily lend itself to you would turn out to be a maniac who kills people anyway, because a lot of times in life it doesn't work like that anyway. A lot of these people come from perfectly fine families.
Mhm.
Obviously,
Yeah.
the psychology of someone who becomes a maniac, it's a bit more different than that. It doesn't necessarily pan out than, hey, you come from a scummy family, so you're gonna be, yeah. So, like
It,
you, I didn't enjoy spending time with these people. They were
no.
very boring anyway. So, and that's the thing about his whole style. It's not just the fact that it's probably extreme for the sake of being extreme. It's just the fact that the movies of his are boring to watch anyway. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
I
I
think
remember
he's a bad filmmaker.
yeah, I don't think he's great. And I don't like want to like shit all over Zombie or whatever. He obviously does love what he does. Like that comes through in the film. That comes through in his other films as well. He obviously does like this genre. He enjoys it. But I think he has some issues. I think he has some issues that he really needs to sort through, because I was watching the first like 40 minutes of this film and just thinking, I hate everyone in this film. I hate this film. It doesn't feel like a Halloween film. I remember making a note that at least in the first 40 minutes, we don't have characters, we have caricatures. Everyone in that
Yeah,
first 40 minutes is a complete caricature. Now, I did think some of the murder scene was done okay. I thought that
mm,
there was a bit where the boyfriend, after he and the sister have finished having sex, he comes downstairs and Michael is kind of creeping around, like after he's killed the stepfather, and the stepfather is lying there like with his throat slit. I thought that was a little bit effective, but then again, we go into complete and utter overkill when he beats the boyfriend to death with the baseball bat. Again, a scene that just went for far too long. I really wonder like what is going through Zombie's mind when he films these scenes, and that he has them go for so long. And I say this as a horror fan who enjoys a good creative kill. Just these scenes were just too much for me. That being said, after the first 40 minutes, when we actually got into the proper storyline, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It definitely was not good. And I think there's an issue with a lot of the stuff feels very just kind of copied and pasted, like a lot of the scenes are
yeah,
almost exactly like the scenes from the first movie, only done in Zombies over the top style. So it just really doesn't work. And I found that anytime they try to make a reference to the original movie, like, you know, Don't Fear the Reaper plays a couple of times, and they have Mr. Sandman play in a horrible rendition of Mr. Sandman.
That's terrible.
It is terrible, isn't it? Yeah, it's like all slow and dreary, and I don't even know what that was. And there were a couple of other little shout outs, but because the zombie film is so different in tone, they didn't feel like shout outs or homages. They just felt really jarring, at least to me. Like anytime they tried to use the theme or they tried to use the score from the original one, because they do use the same score, it didn't feel like it belonged in this film. And I kind of felt like if Zombie was going to do his own film, then it should have been his own film. Like it just should have been him doing his own thing and not trying to pay homage to Carpenter, because I don't think that the homages and zombie style blended well, and I found it quite jarring.
Just shoehorned in, sort of, like it just had to be there because it's a remake of Halloween.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And yeah, I will say though,
that wasn't great.
1 point for Danny Trejo, because, well, you know, Danny Trejo, so I will give him a point for having him in it and actually playing like a calmer character. He usually plays much more intense characters, so I will give a point for him. Now, adult Michael is a fucking beast, man. That first scene in the asylum when he stood up, I was just like, whoa. I'm pretty sure he is the tallest Michael. He's like 6'8" or something. And I think that his height works for him. I will say this Michael was the first Michael to actually scare me since the original film. Like the actual first actor that I feel embodied Michael Myers-ish to a certain degree. He's still Zombies Michael, but I will say I found Michael scary in this. I liked the mask. I thought the mask was actually quite good, especially because we've had like 5 or 6 movies with terrible, terrible masks. So it's kind of nice to see this mask anyway. And I did like that they didn't have adult Michael speak, even though we had to deal with kid Michael speaking. At least adult Michael didn't speak. And I thought that he was quite effective. Like I found him quite scary. So I think he's played by the same actor who played Sabretooth in the first X-Men. So I think he's a former WWF.
I saw that online. Oh, okay.
So I liked Michael in this. He was at least a plus for me. What about you?
Yeah, I agree with the mask probably. Yeah, I'm trying to remember, to be honest, what I thought at this stage, because it was a while ago I actually watched the movie, but it might have just been because I wasn't into the movie, because obviously by that point you've already had 40 minutes of movie.
I know.
It's probably more the way the scenes play out. I mean, maybe the Michael himself was actually fine. Like you said, really big guy, quite intimidating. So probably, to be fair, the Michael himself and his presence might have been fine. It was just because I didn't really like the way scenes played out. So that sort of took me out of scenes anyway, even if he was like this charismatic presence. Because, it just sort of rushes through characters. You get the nurse being like killed off like it's nothing, and it's just stuff like that. I mean, Danny Trejo, okay, good actor, and the character at least wasn't awful like everyone else, but really he's wasted. They don't really do anything interested with him. I didn't really feel like there was a bond between him and Michael, which they were obviously trying to maybe force than there could have been. At this point, I'll ask you about Loomis in this film. What did you think about Loomis?
Okay,
Malcolm
McDowell. I didn't love him in the prequel type area. I didn't like him in the first 40 minutes. After the time jump, I thought he was okay. Obviously, no one is ever going to be able to live up to Donald Pleasance and his huge shoes. But I thought for what they wanted, for what this movie was, and for what Zombie was trying to do, I thought McDowell he was good. I didn't think he was fantastic, but I thought for this Loomis, I thought he was all right. We're going to talk about what they do to him when we get to the second film, because do I have issues with what they do to his character there.
Yeah, that's a whole different story.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing, so look out for that, guys. But in this movie, I thought he was actually okay. I I don't remember him having that much of a presence now that I think about it, though, because you know how in the first movie,
Yeah.
his presence fills the movie. You know, he's always, even when he's not on screen, he's always kind of there. But this movie didn't seem to have that same kind of presence that Loomis has had in the previous films. But I thought McDowell was okay. What about you? Did you like him, or is
Yeah.
Pleasant just too big a shoe
Probably
to fill?
similar. Yeah, similar, mate. Because obviously I like him as an actor, but so I don't know if he was just miscast or is not the sort of you cast for this, or maybe it just wasn't a very good Loomis. I certainly don't think it was a very good Loomis, but
Mm.
it could have been an overall thing because, like, you know, stuff like the interview scenes with Michael, I just thought were kind of again very soapy, very, very melodramatic. I would say he did okay. I thought he did as well as he could in a movie which isn't very good and isn't
Yeah.
giving him much to really do. You know, it certainly doesn't feel like the important role
No.
that Loomis
No.
had, not just in
Mm.
the first film, but for quite a few sequels after that, because
Mm.
in many ways he carries some of the sequels. So, yeah, wasted in
Characters.
this, really good character actor.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not very good. He's again just wasted, just
Mm.
throwaway sort of character. Not really a character which probably doesn't really work to Brad Dourif's sort of strength. Which I guess brings us up to one of the biggest problem, and that's how they butcher the Laurie character, because
Yeah, Laurie
Laurie
Strode.
is absolutely terrible in this movie. Her and
She's
her friends.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah, I did not
This
like
just
her
seemed like
friends.
typical, you know, sort of teen stuff. Again, you know, zombie. Maybe talk more about this later, but the zombie doesn't really know how to write characters. He doesn't know how to write teen characters,
Mm.
and they just yeah, it's just like they made Laurie almost the same as the other characters. They made her into a bratty, whiny, sort of shallow sort of girl. You know, none of the substance of the original Laurie. The actress was quite bad, I thought, but they just made her into this sort of stereotype, which was just turned up to 11 and kind of annoying. That's they don't make her likable. They don't make her stand out from her friends, which obviously she.
Laurie, it was it's like I said when in our Resurrection review. If you're going to be a final girl, you have to earn the final girl status. You have to do things that will earn you that status. And Laurie just doesn't in this one. I didn't find her quite as annoying as you seem to find her. I thought she was okay. I agree that they did not make her stand
Mm,
out from her friends. I thought she was nice enough. Scout Taylor Compton has not done a lot. I think I know her best from Gilmore Girls. She has a very, very small part in Gilmore Girls. She
okay.
plays Dean's younger sister, Clara, and she's in like maybe 2 or 3 episodes.
Okay, I
Yeah,
remember her being quite good in that. Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So I think my
Okay.
biggest issue with Laurie, and we'll get into this when we get towards like discussing the climax of the film, but my biggest issue with this Laurie is that she was very, very passive. You know, Laurie in the first movie, and we talked about this in our review, was not going down without a fight, you know. Michael has her cornered in a
Yeah,
cupboard and she's like, screw this. And she grabs a coat hanger and she stabs him in the freaking eye. This Laurie, and again, this is going to get worse when we get to the second film, and we'll talk about that when we get to the second film,
yeah,
but she mostly just runs around and screams. And it's like, you're the final girl. You're
yeah,
supposed to be proactive in your own survival. That's what makes a final girl. When you look at Sydney Prescott, when you look at Laurie Strode, even when you look at Julie from I Know What She Did Last Summer, or I can't remember her name, but the final girl from A Texas Chainsaw Massacre, all of these girls, Jess from Black Christmas, they are so instrumental in their own survival. They fight back. They find ways to outsmart the killers. They earn the final girl title. And Laurie in this movie just doesn't do that. There's nothing to her character, you know, she's just the nice girl next door, and that's it. Her friends, Linda, this version of Linda, did not like her at all. Annie gets a few more points because she is played by Danielle
Yeah.
Harris. So, of course, she gets some extra points for that. And I think Annie, at least, is somewhat slightly more developed. And again, when we get to the second film, we'll get a bit more into Annie's character. But I thought that Danielle Harris was pretty good. I did have, and again, I think Zombies just got some issues. I did have big issues with the fact that both of her friends died in the nude. Like, was that necessary? It just seems to me so exploitative. It's like you're already butchering teenage girls on screen, and it's a movie, and we're suspending reality, but you don't have to have them flailing around topless. I remember hearing that Danielle Harris really wanted this part. She actually really wanted to be part of this movie. And one of the conditions of them giving her this role was they said, you have to agree to do this scene. And so that's why she got, ended up doing, that's the only reason she got this role, is because she said, fine, I'll do this scene in the nude. And I mean, she spends a good 20 minutes of this film with no shirt on. And I know it's a small thing and it sounds like I'm a prude. I understand that nudity in films can be artistic and that sometimes you need it to make a point, but not in horror films. In horror films, it's just exploitative. And to have both of them die while they're naked and then have Michael butcher their naked bodies, it felt very exploitative to me.
A little, because obviously I think sometimes when you have it in horror, it is because that's just part of the history with horror. So I think you can have it where it's just like a nod to that. So that stuff maybe isn't so bad, but I think in this, when you kind of expect this to be a more serious type horror movie, and there's just no reason for it. I mean, it doesn't really make the scene any more shocking. It's, in theory, it's already shocking enough. It is just exploitative. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And I mean, to be honest, I forgot it was Danielle Harris until after the film, and then okay, she's in it. And I think that's just the thing, is I think probably in the film she is fine, but I think Zombie is the sort of director who can take talented people and just make them seem like nothing, really. And there's some, I mean, skipping over certain things, but there's a terrible Loomis line at some point where he seems to refer to gay people as shut turkers, or shirt tucker. That was actually
lovely.
I don't even get that line, but apparently, according to this movie, it's like an offensive term for a gay person. And why Loomis would be making that sort of remark, I don't know. But apparently,
I know, of all characters.
This, everyone's just so potty mouth. And I was just saying about Laurie, because at one point she says to Annie, she calls her sexy. She's like, bye, sexy. And again, that is not a Laurie sort of a line. But that's what I mean. She's almost too similar to the other characters. They almost make Laurie sort of flirty, which is not what you think of with Laurie. And again, just going to the rehashes of the original kills, but just weaker. The Linda kill, which is obviously a classic that people remember from the first one. That kill is just whittled away. I mean, Michael choking her is nowhere near as chilling and effective as her being strangled in the original with that foam wire. It's just not, the way he directs it and the way the scene plays out. They'd just done his own thing, really, if he was gonna remade it, and had certain nods to the original, but it's just they even butcher the whole the end line in a way. Was that the boogeyman? I believe it was. They even butcher that. The delivery of that is totally wrong. And because, to be honest, because I saw this when it first came out, and at that point, because I'd maybe only seen the original once or twice, so I actually did forget that was the end line. So actually, when I heard it in this film, it made me mad because I actually dismissed it as a shitty line. But I think it's because of the way it's delivered in this. Then it is really bad. And then we actually carry on. They don't end it there. That's another thing that bothered me, because really, that's the perfect way to end it. I mean, not in this case because they mess it up anyway, but sort of just going on, that's how the original film ended. And so you actually have Laurie, I guess, quote unquote, kill Michael. Yeah, which is not the way the movie should be ending.
No,
because then they have to come up with convoluted ways to keep him alive anyway. But...
yeah, except I don't think they do come up with, I think they just kind of say he's alive, because she shoots him in the face. I mean, I know the guy can take a lot. He survived the second movie being shot in both eyes, so I think at this point in time we maybe shouldn't be quibbling over what he can and cannot survive. But yeah, she shoots him in the face, and he somehow comes back from that. Also, Loomis, because this is going to become a thing in the second one, Loomis, it looks like he dies. He doesn't, but it looks like he dies. Michael fully gouges his eyes out, and when we get to the second movie, we'll talk about the fallout of that. That'll, I don't want to give anything away, but okay. that leads into a whole thing that just makes no sense. I will say that there was one scene in the climax, kind of towards the climax, that I did find scary and effective, and it's when Laurie comes to the house that Annie is at, and she finds Annie lying at the bottom of the stairs, and Annie is, has been stabbed multiple times, and Laurie runs off to call the police, and the door closes, and Michael is standing behind the door, and Annie is trying to scream to Laurie to warn her, and all she can do is scream out her name, and Laurie thinks that she's just calling out for her, and she's like, "Don't worry, baby, it's okay, it's coming." And I just thought that was effective, showing Annie's terror and trying to warn Laurie that Michael is coming. And I thought, I don't know, that worked for me. But then you end up with this whole long-winded climax that just goes for at least 10-15 minutes of Michael just chasing Laurie around. And it seems like, okay, now we're going to get into how Zombie really wanted to lean into this whole their brother and sister thing. And he put in this little kind of character plot point that does not work for me at all. So when you see Michael's family in the first 40 minutes of the film, he obviously hates them all. He hates his stepfather. He hates his sister. He maybe doesn't hate his mother. We're going to talk about that more in the second one, because there's a whole thing that with the mummy issues, but they show that he loves, he apparently loves his baby sister. And I remember taking a note that actually said, "You can't expect me to believe that Michael is a sociopath or a psychopath who hates everyone except his baby sister. Why am I supposed to believe that he loves his baby sister enough that when he gets out of the asylum, he's actually come back to find her so they can be together?" Because that's the impression that you get, is not that he's trying to kill her, because at one point he holds out the photo to her to show her that their family. She obviously doesn't understand what's going on, and Zombie really leans into this whole this is his sister and he actually wouldn't do her harm, which I don't like at all. It takes away the menace. It's well, then what's his major plan? To kidnap Laurie and they're just going to go and play messed up families together? It doesn't make sense to me, and it didn't work for me at all. What about you? Did you
No.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's rubbish.
Because
obviously it's the sort of thing where, now with the passage of time passing, he obviously could have recognised that wasn't a good retcon in the original the first sequel. So he could have recognised that and said, let's just not do that. It's a remake. I don't have to do that.
Yes, exactly.
And it definitely leaned into it too much.
Yeah, I agree. And it just doesn't work. And that climax just goes for way too long. And again, it's literally just Michael chasing her and her screaming. There's no fight back. There's no clever maneuver to outsmart him. There's no traps. There's nothing. It's literally just him chasing her while she screams. And I was just getting to the point where I just wanted to turn the movie off, because it was just getting to be too much. I was just I'm done. I just want this to be over. And it was just not entertaining. It was not fun to watch. It was just endless, the same thing in repetition. It was just terrible. It was a terrible climax. I did not like it at all.
The Annie scene being one of the better ones. And again, that probably may come down to Danielle Harris being a good actress. I think she probably sold that well, because I do remember actually being quite convinced by that, and that's a rare moment where you actually feel the bond with those two characters. And certainly Danielle Harris really sells that. But the end of the movie is pretty terrible.
It's terrible. It's terrible. It's bad. It's just, and then they even like hammer this brother sister thing home even further during the credits. They intersperse the credits with like pictures of like Michael and Laurie when they were kids, and it's like, okay, enough already. This is a dead horse. Stop beating it. We're done. And it's just
credit sequence. It felt a bit like he was going for like a true crime documentary style feel. You know, that those sorts of shots remind me a bit of that. So that felt like that, and again, I hated that stuff as well.
I know, right? It was terrible.
Needed. Yeah, it's terrible.
So I think we've arrived at. I think we've exhausted everything you can talk about with this movie. Ratings. How would you go?
I'll go 2 out of 10. This is the worst. We're going to get on to 2, but obviously up to this point, not giving away my feelings on 2, that this was the worst one, because it's just offensive for all the reasons we're talking about. Personally, maybe the odd scene, maybe I'll give Danielle Harris some credit for the way she sold that scene. I think, obviously, because you do have good actors in this movie, obviously Malcolm McDowell. Malcolm McDowell is a good actor, so I guess he's an all right Loomis, I would say, but obviously he's not given much to do. Brad Dourif is wasted. But overall, as a horror movie, it's obviously an insult to the original. It's a boring movie. I hated the characters. And it kind of doesn't work on any level. The 40 minutes they added in didn't add anything and just missed the point of the original. And most of the stuff we got after that wasn't much better, for the simple fact that it was just a lame rehash of the original, and people can just go and watch the original and just say, this is how you do those scenes, basically. So it was really bad. I thought there was some bad acting, some okay acting as well, but I think it's just that thing of, I think any actor can be made to look bad if they're not being directed properly and they're not really given the material. So I think because of how boring it was and because of what it does to the original, that's why I'm going as low as I am. I think it's more because you can always argue, you can say Resurrection may be worse as a piece of filmmaking. You can say maybe there's worse stuff in that, but I had more fun with that for obviously reasons we've talked about, and it's not really the insult that this is. So 2 out of 10.
Wow, that's like the lowest that you've rated any of these movies yet. I'm going to be a little bit more generous. There are a couple of things in this film that elevate it slightly for me. Like I said before, if I have a good Michael, that can actually do wonders for me, because obviously he is the center of this film, and we have sat through how many films now? 6 or 7 films of a really, really terrible Michael. So having a Michael who was physically imposing and had that physical presence and actually scared me lifts the rating just a little bit. Danielle Harris, I think, was good. I'm going to give points for Danny Trejo and Brad Dourif, even if they were both kind of slightly miscast. It's always just fun to see them. So I would probably go with a 4, maybe a 4.5 for this one, just because Michael was so scary, and I don't think I found it as boring as you did too. Like, I was getting to the point where I actually wanted to turn it off, but it was more because I was exhausted, because it was stressing me out so much. And the second film was worse. We're going to talk about that, but I'd go, probably about 4.5. I'll go with 4.5. I'm going to give an extra 0.5 point for Danny Trejo, because I just love seeing Danny Trejo in anything. So for me, again, like I said, I think if Michael had not been what he'd been, then I might have been rating it a 2. He definitely elevates it for me, and I was very impressed with his actor. I've got to look up who it was. Not since Nick Castle have I felt scared of the shape. So that really brought it back for me. But just too much overkill. Those first 40 minutes are just ridiculous, and there's a complete lack of characterization in this film. Like Zombie, like you said, does not seem to know how to write believable people. And so a lot of the characters are just caricatures. But I'm going to rank it a little bit higher for having a scarier Michael and having a few actors that I like. So I'm being maybe a little too generous, but we're going to go with 4.5 for me.
Yeah, I think you are. Yeah. Because you sort of rated it a bit higher than Resurrection.
I got bored during Resurrection. I think that's why. Like, Resurrection bored me. It definitely did amuse me in some points, but in some points it bored me, whereas the zombie film just made me exhausted, but I didn't actually get bored. It was more provoking stronger emotions in me, like, oh, I hate this film. At first I hated it. Like, if it had continued the way it did for those first 40 minutes, I would have been giving it like a 0 out of 10. It was only saved by the fact that they actually ended and moved on to a different part of the movie. But I'm just such a sucker for a good Michael. Like, he's my favorite. Like, he's one of my favorite villains. And so if you have a good Michael, it really can elevate the film for me. So, yeah. Maybe a little too generous, but I'm going to go with that.
Yeah, it's a strange one for me, because I can sort of see how maybe it was a good Michael, but I don't know. I guess just because I wasn't into the scenes, what they were doing in the scenes, sort of thing. And probably at that point I might have been sort of tapped out. Because those first 40 minutes seemed very long. 40 minutes.
40 minutes. Just skip them, people. If you're ever going to watch this movie, just jump into the 40-minute mark. You're not going to miss anything.